So, Jenny, we're in some unprecedented times at the moment, and I saw one of the things you do to keep yourself busy is reading passages from your book. So what has the last couple of weeks been like for you?
Yeah, it's been, I think, frustrating at the beginning, I was ill, so I got in confinement a bit earlier than the actual government lockdown. So I've been in confinement for 5 weeks now.
Okay.
So at first I was ill, so then I recovered, and then I didn't feel like it was different from any kind of self-isolation I would just do anyway in order to try to do things, that I need to do. But now, I mean, the reality of it is, starting to sink in, and especially the consequences for touring, for a lot of artists right now. There's so much uncertainty about, there's certainty that we cannot tour for May, June, July. But then when is it possible to come back? It's really hard to plan things because we don't actually know. And depending on the countries, like in America, how it's going to look like in September, So I think it's just a little bit, it can get frustrating, and quite, I have felt quite anxious sometimes, like everybody. But I try to keep myself busy and being creative, because that's the only thing you can do, in moments like this. So.
Well, I can imagine a lot of those anxious thoughts. Will they find their way to like you say, creativity?
No, yeah. I'm not trying to get the anxiety into the creativity, but I think I'm having a really difficult time creating when I'm anxious. I don't think we work together really well. But being creative is a way to palliate or to stop anxiety, I think, for sure. If you get into the details of the work, then your mind is sort of occupied. So
fair enough. So let's talk about the work then, because luckily you do already have an album finished.
Yes.
Now I read that what kind of kicked things off was David Bowie, and what was it about kind of that period and his final album Black Star that kind of catapulted you into that creative kind of?
The night that Bowie died, I was in LA preparing for a tour with Savages for the record Adore Life, and in the middle of the night, I just opened my phone and I saw news about his death, and I think I just I was a Bowie fan, and every time a musician dies, I feel very, touched by it, and because it's, musicians are part of my community and my family, as well.
Sure. And
also there's a whole part of history that's dying with us people as they go away, and knowledge is going away with them, So I feel all of those things usually, but here there was something a bit more in the sense, because there was Black Star, and Black Star was still there, even after he was gone, and he had left it as a gift, or as and I felt that suddenly it reminded me how much artists are outlived by their art, and that even though I was already really interested in the message put into the music, I think it just put another weight onto the record without being too serious. But the idea of a record is more important than the artist in a way. It's the music will outlive you, and that's what's more important. So I just felt also my own mortality, and the idea, I shouldn't delay things that I really wanted to do. And
I can kind of hook in on this what you just said now, because The Countryside, I suppose, is one of those songs that kind of originated out of that thought. Am I right? Kind of because you wrote those lyrics while you were flying?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the record then got infused with this idea of mortality. This because we spend a lifetime forgetting that we are mortal beings, you know. But when we are reminded of that, I think we become better. We there's something that elevates our own humanity with the notions of death, and so I think death in a way brings more value to life, and that density it brings to living is something that I wanted to bring into the record in different ways, that sense of urgency. And so French Countryside felt that it was fitting lyrically with that idea, because I wrote it in a plane when I believed we were going to crash, and the idea is that it's a promise song. You're making promises about how you're going to love better, live better if you survive. And of course, once you land, you forget.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about that.
But you forget, but that's why I wanted to write a song about it, or keep a song in the record, because I wanted to keep it in mind, you know.
It's a reminder. It's kind of something, right. Because you raise an interesting point in terms of mortality, and then the artist, almost kind of making art is your way to immortality in a way. So how do you look back now at your body of work that you've done before? Okay, do you look at it differently now that you kind of know, well, this will be here in essence forever? And then did it affect you writing this new album? That thought? Yeah,
it definitely affected writing this album, To Love Is To Live. This idea of that I was creating something that was going to stay after me. So the effect it had was that I didn't want it to be too caught up into a time, even stylistically or in what it was saying. I was trying to, as much as possible, because I want to say that with humility, because you can always want to try something, but then if you achieving it is another thing. But I was trying to do things with keeping this notion of timelessness in mind, and not trying to. And the way I would do that is basically, if I saw everybody going one direction, I would be trying to go the other way. Basically, it was sort of a natural instinct. For example, I felt that I wanted to make a record that was going to be complex, that was going to reflect the complexity of what it is to be human, and maybe make a record that needs maybe several times to several listens before you start to understand, or have actually different layers that you can get into in different listens. And that's why the record sort of works as a spiral as well. When you finish it, it sort of can start again. So it finishes the way it starts, and this sort of never-ending loop and spiral with the record.
And with those layers, because like you say, it's one thing to kind of want to do that, but then to try and accomplish that. How did you? Because to me, some of the songs had very, very much progressive elements to them. So kind of that layering that you talk about. So was that kind of? Do you think a lot about those things beforehand, or is that something that kind of comes as you go?
Well, the record was made over a period of 2 years almost, and it was. I didn't want to do it the way I had done records before, which is to go in the studio for 3 weeks and that's it, done. I wanted to collaborate with different people. I didn't want to. I was very open to other people, because in the past I had been very, very closed down, and I didn't want to repeat myself.
What changed? Why were you more open this time?
I just didn't want to repeat myself. Okay. I just didn't want to do things the way I had done them before, and it felt that openness was something I had never tried.
Was it a difficult thing to do, to kind of open yourself up, or those vulnerabilities to people that you're working with?
I mean, everything is difficult, so everything has its own challenges. I think it was not difficult to let them express themselves, like all the different collaborators. I would leave a big space for them, and at some point the record, they owned the record as much as I did. At each point of their own creative process, but that was intentional. I am always like, that's why I don't really like the word solo record. I always feel that it's not a solo record; it's a personal record, but it's a very collaborative record. Sorry, I forgot what we were talking about.
Sorry for cutting you off, but you were talking about kind of why you wanted to change things up. You didn't want to repeat the way you were working, and so that's why you went into collaborations with people.
The process of the record has been over 2 years, and it was actually a lot of hours of research. First with me and Jehnny Beth in the studio in Paris, and I had almost all the lyrics quite quickly, and I knew what I was going to say, but musically, that's where all the research and the time was spent. And it was very valuable to have all that research, because then we could we would have like a jazz version of a track, or a drum and bass version of a track, or a really punk version of a track. And each time we'd love one element in it, or identified an emotion we liked. And that's how then we tried to identify the parts that we wanted to keep. And when we went to see other producers, for instance, we would play all those kind of different versions and work through what we liked in each of them. But some songs were kept from those early research, like Flower or We Will Sing Together, which were produced by Jehnny Beth. So I think what happened is I was really in a phase in my life where I wanted to learn new methods and new ways of doing. So I spent a lot of time writing with Romy, Madley, Croft, for instance, of the XX, who was a big fan and knew me as a friend, but also came from a very different world, which is the pop world, and had a very different approach to lyric writing and structuring songs. And I spent some time with her writing, but in the end, I mean, maybe I don't know how, maybe 10% of what we wrote made it to the record, but it didn't matter. It was, I was, the way photographers have to take maybe 1,000 pictures to have one good picture. That's how I imagined the record. That's how I wanted to do it. We will not going to hold back on research and experimentation with the music, and then take what's best in anything we do,
In that sense, because I can imagine that's both very time-consuming in a way, so that must have been quite an effort that you had to put in. But also, once all that work is done, what do you use to whittle it down again and to think, okay, no, this mood or this emotion, that's what I want?
You have to be very selective, I think, with your work. You can't really attach your ego to it, because because sometimes the idea you had is the one that needs to go away. So you have to be very open and not put your ego too soon into the process, and not look for closure too soon as well. Sometimes, because studios are very expensive as well, we want to feel like we're productive. We want to feel like we've done one day in the studio and we've nailed that thing, and that song now is really going somewhere, and this song's almost finished. And I think that's sometimes a mistake, because we don't allow the creative process is really it's so unpredictable and not very you can't really control it. It's a bit like a wild animal, and if you're trying to put fences too soon, you sort of suffocate the music, but you have to accept then to spend time and money and which nowadays is a bit of you have to be a bit insane. But luckily I found some people that were as insane as me and wanted to put the time and the money into it.
Well, you mentioned something interesting, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but kind of the idea that my assessment of kind of the music industry these days is that they are simply not willing to invest or let people experiment. They need something that can make them money without being too much trouble in a way. How are you balancing kind of wanting to produce art, but then also being part of that music business? Is that a difficult thing to do?
I pay for it myself.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, I've literally spent every bit of my savings into this record.
Okay.
I could have bought a house. But that's the way I am. And I think it was, for me and Johnny Hostile, my partner, so we both invested into it.
Sure.
It's just, as far as money is concerned, I mean, it's always a risk, but I'd rather take it than wait for somebody else to believe in it. And so it's a strange life.
But so, well, a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, what was the feeling then after all that effort and kind of sacrifices that you made for it to hold that vinyl in your hand or the first kind of tangible product? What was that like?
I still haven't held it.
Oh, okay.
In my hands.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. You've been.
The vinyl is still not manufactured because.
Okay, yeah, because you've been quarantined for 5 weeks. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and also the vinyl industry is kind of holding. All the manufacturers are closed right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that moment will still come. So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah. No, it's always a special moment, the moment when you hold your vinyl in your hand for the first time. It's
and then the other side of that is because when you're younger and you start making music and everything, the kind of that business side and what we've just talked about, you don't really think about. So has your in that sense, can I assume that your kind of what you want to get out of music hasn't changed from when you were young? You kind of have the same drive in a way.
I definitely have the same drive. I feel that you're right. When you're young, you don't know about what a publishing deal is, what a recording deal is, and you have to learn the hard way. I actually would recommend any young musician to start reading contracts and take low lessons, because that's part of your job and you can't really escape it. And when I say learn the hard way, it's because you necessarily learn by signing a bad deal and then learning not to sign another one. The only truth in that is you have to keep producing music and move forward, because if you try to hold back on past mistakes, you would hold you down forever. So trying to be free in the music business while still earning a living, and it's difficult. And sometimes you have to learn to let go in order to make advancements and have people investing in your music, and sometimes you have to learn to hold back. So it's I'm still learning. Like, it's a difficult game, and you're dealing with people it's their job to do that, and your job is to make the music. So you just have to find the ways that to be surrounded by people who you trust and who are really, really good at looking at securing your interests and stuff. So, but that takes a long time. It took me over a decade to find the right people to work with. So,
but one thing you've kind of just mentioned, and I wrote one word down to kind of, for me, sum up the album, which is it's a horrible idea, but I wrote down unapologetic. Is that fair? That you were very unapologetic on this album?
I think so. I think it's funny because it's one of the words that Tom Hingston, the designer of the album cover, said about the pose that we chose for the artwork. It said it's very unapologetic, which I think is true about the music as well. I wouldn't be able to say it from my own perspective, but that's definitely something I've heard. Yeah.
But when you wrote these songs, because you said the lyrics came together quite quickly, so were you, when you were writing these songs, were you very determined in what you were writing, and did it all make sense immediately?
No, it doesn't make sense immediately. I think it's more of you're searching for something, and things come to you from, it will be something you read or something, a discussion you have, or things that have been in your head for a while. And I was, at the time, extremely prolific in writing. I was writing every day. I think, again, it's about writing a lot so you can take the best. So there's always this feeling that I'm writing today, I think I've wrote a really good song today, really good lyrics, I think I'm onto something, but what if tomorrow I write a better song than that, So you just have to keep writing, because and sometimes you have to like for a few weeks, all you can write sounds like Bruce Springsteen, you know. But and you have to go through that phase in order to get to the next phase. So I think it's a matter of going through it, and doing is more important than thinking.
Right.
In those situations.
So not trying to overthink or analyze what you're doing too much, and then maybe until later when.
Yeah, you should analyze at some point and try to see if you got something that you just have to trust that at the end things are going to make sense and find connections that you didn't really think were there. But yeah.
And then we mentioned kind of being selective. So what were you specifically looking for in these 11 songs?
The things that I followed creatively all the way through was trying to select the music or the vocal takes or anything that I wouldn't be able to understand, that I wouldn't be really able to identify what it was. Like if I heard a vocal from me and I was like, I've never heard myself like this is not me, then I would keep it. Because otherwise I was afraid to repeat myself, and if I heard like a part of a song and I would be like, oh, yeah, I know what that is, then I would get rid of it because I thought this is not the point of this record. The point is to really try to go where it's uncomfortable. Like a song like French Countryside, up until the mixing, I didn't want it on the record.
Okay.
Because I felt too vulnerable about it. I felt I was so exposed. But in the end, Alan Mulder, who mixed the record, did a brilliant mix. And when he played it to me, I said to him, "You saved the song. Like, you just saved the song. It's in."
But that's interesting because what song? Can you give me an example of a song that for you transformed the most from kind of your initial idea that you had and kind of how it eventually turned out?
Heroine.
Okay.
Yeah, Heroine was supposed to be a song called Heroism. Okay. It was about America, weirdly. And it had different versions, like many versions, and then nothing that we were really satisfied with. And then at the end, towards making the record, at the end, we worked with Flood on different songs and went in his studio in London. And it was a big studio, and we recorded drums, and it was, parts of the record is quite electronic, but parts of the record is quite drummy, and that's the songs we worked with Flood mainly. But and then Heroism, he wasn't satisfied with the lyrics, and he was telling me, why don't you call it Heroine? Why don't we explore that idea? And then I felt it was too conventional, like woman talking about being a heroine. But then I was trying to describe what a heroine would be to me, and I was saying all I want is a heroine. And then Johnny Hostile one night was like, why are you talking about other heroines? Because you are supposed to be the heroine. If you are the evil man in I'm the Man, you should be the heroine in Heroine. And it was interesting because I was like, it's true that in my psyche, it was like I'm very happy to talk about my faults and my mistakes. But when it's about talking about my own qualities, suddenly I freeze, And sonically, it was completely redone from scratch. I mean, apart from a few sounds that we kept, but it was redone from scratch in the studio.
Yeah, what you just mentioned is interesting because I think in I'm the Man, that's kind of what the idea was as well, in the sense of acknowledging the darker side of yourself, or the acknowledging that every one of us has that has a sense, has a sense of evil in themselves if they allow it. So like you say, what is it like then? Because you it's easy to talk about yourself. Oh, I'm not good at this, but as a public singer, in a way, a musician. I mean, you're on stage. So how does that work? Is that side of it, kind of the fact that you are up on a stage and people are looking at you? Are you comfortable being on stage?
Yeah, it is a very unnatural place to be, but it is also a place I've known my whole life, because I grew up with my father being a theatre director, and so at the age of 3 years old, I was acting in his plays, and after school, I would go to see him rehearse with his troupe of actors on different kind of amazing theatre plays, like Ibsen or Edward Bond or I don't know, like incredible cultists or incredible like theatre writers, and this drama in this sense of group work as well, and being locked up in a dark room when it's sunny outside and and working really hard and really late at night. So I was an observer of my dad working in that way for years. And sometimes I would play in his plays. And then he started a drama school, and I was one of his students. And he was a very, very good teacher. And he taught me my first lessons in stage, very early on. So yes, the stage is a very natural place for a human, but it's also one of the places where I feel the most safe, and I feel that I can do whatever I want, and without any sort of any impact from the outside world, or even society's morals, or and I feel very liberated, because it's a moment where there's no observer at all anymore, and it's a moment where I stop thinking. When I can just connect in a very different way, and more in it's a sort of a total concentration and total energy, and that total energy is the highest form of intelligence, in my opinion.
Well, this is going to sound weird, and I'm not a musician, so I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, but is it a very, because like you say, it's very freeing. Is it almost like a separation of self in a way, that it's still you, but it's not you in a way?
Yeah.
Being on stage.
Yeah. I it is. Yeah, because it doesn't. I don't think people would be very interested in it if I was just stepping in my pajamas. You know what I mean? It's a representation.
Because well, maybe I can phrase it a little bit better. When you go on stage, does that require a certain mood or a certain mindset for you?
The only thing that I used to think so. I used to, and I still need preparation before I go on, or concentration, less than I used to. But I think it's just trying to capture the moment, and for that you need to be. It's a mix between being in yourself, but also very, very aware of what's around you. So it's a bit like a trance, and it's very shamanic in a way, stage. And it used to be even more for me, especially in the early days of Savages. And sometimes I look at myself on stage from those times that I don't really know how I did it, And it's quite transformative. But art is about representation. I don't think that's why I have a really difficult time with what's going on right now, with everyone asking you to do like live concerts at home in your kitchen and everything like that, because I believe in art being about transformation, and even an album being fiction.
Right.
Because I think, the same as a novel or the same as a film, it's a fiction, an album. You put all of you in it, but it's still a representation of you. You know what I mean? And that's why the artwork, when we worked on the artwork of Tom Hingston with the 3D sculpture, that's what I thought was interesting, because suddenly it was a representation of me, which emphasized this idea of a fiction,
I find that interesting, because you said that cover was described as unapologetic. What was your reaction when you first saw that cover?
I was like, wow. Well, the cover was a long process. We did a whole, I worked with a choreographer on a set of poses. Then we Then there was a whole day where I spent with all these kind of 400 cameras around me and being naked all day with 10 people around me. So it was, when I was doing it, I felt very uncomfortable, but I think I didn't show any signs of it being uncomfortable. It was kind of weird to do it. I was sort of thinking, why did I put myself in?
Well, I can imagine, but yeah, like you say, that the look in your eyes isn't that of it's very much of I suppose conviction or
Yeah.
So
yeah, we found that this pose was the most representative of myself on stage, particularly. There was this sort of fierce pose and strength, and I'm very conscious of my body in the sense of I need to do something physical like every day. I'm very and I don't conceive music without my body. I think it's very connected. So it felt right to associate with both of them for the cover.
Right. And picking up what you just mentioned about kind of art being fiction, what do you hope then that what people will hear when they put on the record? Because do you hope it's kind of like watching a movie where you just escape for an hour in a way? Or, because I do think that the type of music that you make, it will also force people to think in a way. Or maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my interpretation.
I think when you make a record, you don't really think of how people should or listen to it or how they will. I think as soon as you put it out, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It sort of lives its own life. I just hope that the record, people will find a certain connection with the record, because I think what I tried to do is to try to create a world with its own language, almost its own heroes, its own myths, and so not that it's escapism, because I think it does make you think, but it is something that it can become yours, and it becomes like a shared sort of space and a shared. But that's where live, and that's why it's so frustrating not to be able to perform it because of the current situation. But we will in the near future, but not right now. But that's why suddenly when you perform it live, when people love the material and have connected with it at home, I think it becomes a sort of, it becomes everybody's world. And it's a form of escapism, I think. But we need it, But anyway, I think that even reality is is its own fiction, Even capitalism is a fiction, and in a way to fight fiction. I mean, you can only fight fiction with fiction. Okay.
Sure. Well, that's one of those ideas that these days we're talking more about kind of images and ideas than reality in a lot of ways. When we talk to each other, we talk about ideologies and all that kind of stuff, but we don't talk about what's actually happening. But anyway, last thing then, because, like you say, you can't play. But realistically, when do you hope you will be able to?
Realistically, I don't know. I'm hoping September, but I don't know. Like, I was supposed to open for one of my favorite bands in America in October, but everyone is pushing their touring to 2021. Realistically, I think people are aware that, especially in America, that they're still going to have restrictions on people getting together, So I don't know. I'm hoping September. I mean, at the moment, it's like we have plan A, plan B, plan C, we're holding dates in January in case September cannot work. And, it's a day by day sort of situation.
Fair enough. But I'm sure it will work itself out in the end.
I hope so. We're ready. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I hear from a lot of musicians, and I think I read somewhere where you said it was an interview maybe 2 years ago where you already said, "Well, I haven't played for a while, so I want to get back on stage." So
yeah,
Once you
Well,
will,
there you go.
yeah, that's going to be
The moment I'm
a good
ready, I'm
time.
not allowed to. But I mean, you can watch. We did a first show at the BBC Six Festival in London at the Roundhouse, and I'm very, very grateful we could do at least that show, which I think, from my point of view, was really a highlight, and I felt very good and very proud.
One final thought then, because you did play it once. What was your experience with those new songs? Did it feel like you say you tried to step out of your comfort zone a little bit, and then so did it feel very different than what you've done before?
It felt different, but not so much.
Okay.
We were highly prepared.
Okay.
We had been working on the live since August, and we performed this show early March. So we had like 6 months of work behind us, and the musicians we chose, me and Johnny Hostile, were highly competent and extremely great musicians, and everyone's so frustrated now because we've seen a bit what it could be and what it was, and then everything being taken away. It's really hard, but it's for the better, and the better of everybody.
Sure.
It's all right.
Jehnny, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you. Really, thanks.
Yeah, you too.